Evans Ofeli joins us now. He's a legal practitioner to explore and interrogate, if you like, some of the issues that should form part of the conversation about electoral reforms in Nigeria. Thanks very much for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
Now, of course, you may have witnessed a little bit of the conversation we had before this segment came on, the intra-party politics of a political party and how it has cost that same political party some elections in time past. But that's not what we're looking at. Now, we've been talking about electoral reforms in various forms over the past few months, especially in the wake of the elections in the first quarter of this year. Political parties are at the center of it. Of course, yes, there is the role of the security agencies to checkmate electoral violence. There is the role of the National Assembly. They're already tinkering with the idea of an electoral reforms, electoral offenses, commission that's also playing out. But the political parties seem to be at the center of all of this. What reforms are crucial for the political parties that should involve the political parties directly if our electoral reforms is going to have any meaning?
Well, I think that if you look at history, political parties have always had problems, and that is why we're talking about the reforms. The first political party that was created in Nigeria was in 1923, as a result of the Clifford Constitution of 1922 that led the elective principle. Do you know that even as at that time, as far back as at that time, the parties had problems and fracas within itself, and that was what pushed for further reforms that we had other constitution that followed. But one of the things I want to talk about is the attitude of the political elites in the political party. Okay, you have a governor who has served its term. Now he's out of...
Or two terms.
Or 2 terms, sorry. 2 terms of 8 years. And then you have that same past governor or former governor dictating the pace in the state. Now, that leads to a lot of... I know there's no law that says you cannot support, as an ex-governor, you cannot support a candidate. But I'm saying that the godfatherism nature and the overbearing influence of the past governors in their political parties and in these states is one of the factors that we need to curb. Perhaps there may be some laws that will, help to checkmate their activities politically.
I'm just curious, because you say that perhaps needs to be a law. What would that law sound like? What would it look like? What would accommodate that law? Because, they'll tell you there's freedom of association and other freedoms, as it were. So I'm just wondering, what would that law in court look like?
Well, I know that it's difficult to find the law because it's more of a moral issue and an attitudinal issue. But I think that if we have certain measures, we can still make laws to that effect. We might make laws to mean that once you have served as a governor, you should not be creating problem, using your influence to create problems between parties. We can couch that. We can stretch the discourse, look at the psychological effects and how it affects the polity. Because that is the most important thing. You see, because that's one of the factors that is militating against our political system. The political parties themselves, the same party, don't even agree. That is why when they go to the polls with the opposition party, it's a full-scale war because they already have war internally. And then going to meet the opposition at the polls, the war continues.
Okay.
So,
there is the Electoral Act as amended, active, and it's the major instrument with which we champion our elections. How much of that, or how well would you say that the political parties align with their responsibilities in that law? Maybe we should begin with the existing laws.
Yes, the political parties hardly align with the provisions.
They
hardly align with the provisions. I'll give you an example. Section 130 of the Electoral Act talk about forbids giving and collection of gratification. Okay, that is vote buying. That anyone who does that has committed an offense. And then there are penalties aligned.
But they say that they haven't committed vote buying this past...
No, they do it. The political elite themselves empower the agents They take money and then they give gratification to influence vote, contrary to the Electoral Act. And because the Electoral Act is so weak, because the security agencies also are not very vigilant. Most of the time, when you send the law enforcement agencies to take care of issues, they go there to look out for violence. Once there's violence, they're able to go after. That's if they can, because this last one we didn't see them. Kogi and Bayelsa. That's what they look out for. They don't look out for who is giving and collecting gratification. There's a huge market. On the day of election, we have the sellers and the buyers transacting openly. And then we have a law that prohibits that. But the law enforcement agencies perhaps should be trained to understand that there's a provision of the law that, that forbids giving and collection of gratification. But most times, the law enforcement agencies are themselves compromised.
Right.
So it becomes a very big issue.
Let me paint a picture for you. I mean, people have said this is what happens across, election points in the country. So they say, like you said, there's a buyer and the seller. So, for example, someone comes to induce with money. So there's someone giving,
Yes.
there's someone collecting.
Yes.
There's a security agent there that perhaps sees all these things and turns a blind eye. Some say he probably was sorted. But then you've talked about the security agent. But then there's also the seller, as it were, the individual, the average Nigerian that participates in this and doesn't say anything. For them, they're thinking, okay, this is the only time we get something, so let's get it and turn a blind eye. So how do we handle that part? Because if we handle the political parties, the security agents, INEC, and then the people, there will also be that weak link.
Yes, we must create awareness. Political education is very important. I mean, the people who collect these monies should be educated enough, should be informed the implication. Because once you collect gratification during voting, you haven't settled. That is how the politicians see it. The people may not be looking at it from that standpoint, but that is how the politicians see it. Once you are settled, you don't expect them to come back to you. And then we look at electoral reform from an isolated point of view. Sometimes we are talking about INEC, we're talking about the people, we're talking about the elites and all that. But electoral reform will also mean amending the constitution, okay, expansively. We look at other institutions as well. Because if you look at the judicial system, for example, okay, you also need to work on electoral petition in, introspective, because you have a situation where the political parties who are aggrieved have just 180 days to make their case and conclude everything.
You say just?
Yeah, because if you look at it, if you are proving irregularities, you have to prove polling unit by polling unit. Okay, local government by local government. And then you are given like 10 days to do that. And the other party is given like 10 days to do that. So the time is short, it's choky. But if we have a system where when you go to the polls, it's transparent and credible, and INEC develop a mind of its own, we will not have to resort to tribunal. So we will have just few cases that will get to tribunal because the participant would have seen that the process was credible and they have lost gallantly.
When you say that just 120 days, it hit me. Because
180 days.
180, pardon me. It hit me. So you believe that 180 days is not enough or are not enough in this case. So what would you suggest? And don't forget, there's also that talk about, so if it takes that long, imagine a person has finished the term and then the judgment comes and says, oh, it was another person that won. So don't you think that time limit is also...
It was that position, this position you just stated now that led to the amendment, the 2010 amendment of the third alteration that created this 180 days, okay? But I'm not saying that the 180 days should be discarded. I'm saying that if you have a political system that is reformed and you have INEC that is able to conduct an election that becomes credible and the candidates see the credibility, they will not resort to tribunal. Okay, but in the event that we are not able to organize the election well, there are violence, giving a collection of gratification, and sometimes political parties, when they discover that they are losing in a particular place, they go there to disrupt it because of the section 26 of the Electoral Act, which says that where the margin of lead or where areas where elections are disrupted are more than the margin of lead, there must be a rerun. So they go there and disrupt it, and they
Just to
ask for
get
a
a
rerun.
rerun.
And then you have all those issues. But I'm saying that if we're able to take care of all these teething issues, then we'll have just few cases that will go to the tribunal. Perhaps the courts can now focus and be able to deliver judgment within time. And also, if you look at the Supreme Court, also the cases that go to the Supreme Court with the election tribunal, with all we should be able to decentralize the judiciary. What I'm saying in essence is that electoral reform should not be discussed in isolation. There are other institutions that, like the police force, should be reformed alongside electoral reform, because they are the one that provide security during elections. Okay, the court system have a work to do post-election. Okay, and how good are the court system? How good are the security agencies? How aware are the people? The kind of level of awareness, political participation and awareness they have. Those are the issues that we must look at alongside the reform.
Well, you brought up an angle the other time that my mind hasn't been able to get off track of, which is, you said the Electoral Act is weak. Now, in what area, what do you mean when you say that the Electoral Act is weak? It is a law. It is supposed to be executed and enforced. So in which way is it weak?
Yeah, why I say the Electoral Act is weak is because if you take a panoramic view of the entire act, okay, the focus is on the technical operation of elections and then the people's conduct. The Electoral Act hardly talks about the political elite that use money to disrupt the system.
Well, there's a section which you mentioned that prescribes a punishment for people that induce, for example.
Section 130.
Exactly, talks about spending also during elections. So
yeah, we should have more punitive areas against the candidates that contest election. Because, you see, the Nigerians on their own volition will not carry ballot boxes on their own volition. They are paid by the politicians. And we seem not to be talking more about it because perhaps they are the elites. The Electoral Act must have serious punitive measure, because once
Punitive
an activity...
measures for who?
For the candidates who influences the people to disrupt the process.
But you know that the Electoral Act does not encourage us voting for candidates. It encourages us to vote for the party. Right?
Yes, it encourages us to vote for the party.
So we vote for the party, not particularly
the parties themselves.
Yes.
The parties themselves have candidates who represent them.
So it's like one and the same.
those candidates, they are funded. They even crowd fund for them.
I just want us to. I just want this to be clear. I'm aware.
Yeah, it's the political party that contests election. You are right.
The political party
contests the
election.
So,
right. In which way does that punitive measure go to who, in particular?
It will go to whoever is caught, okay, influencing the system.
So the political party
disrupting
should be
the
sanctioned.
system. The political party should be sanctioned, and then the party involved should be, the person or the candidate involved should be sanctioned. There's no way you can treat the candidate, okay, in isolation, because even when you go to the tribunals, you sue the candidate alongside, you join the party, because the party is a proper party.
Do you think that's something we can do, or we have been able to even conjecture in our heads? Do you think it's something...
We can do it every jurisdiction.
Why haven't we been doing
every
that?
jurisdiction in the world? Once a particular issue assumes notoriety, look at, for example, before now, kidnapping in Nigeria, there was no law against it. You know, but once that assumed notoriety, and that notoriety is now overwhelming the state will make a law and make capital punishment to curb it, and that's what we have. Now, electoral violence has assumed notoriety. It is now notorious. It has assumed a form of a monster, okay, where people are burnt in their houses, where people are killed. This is the time where we need to make a law and make capital punishment out of it.
But we have a law.
Yes, we have
from what you have said now, we're not even activating that law enough.
We're not.
Okay, so what do we need to do to make that law, to give that law the teeth that it deserves? Because what's the assurance we have that if the law that is active is not being effected or executed, what's the assurance we have that in the law you are
Yeah,
proposing?
you know why the law is not effective and it's not really is because the government agency, okay, which the law created, that is INEC, okay, is not an institution that prosecutes. It's just an umpire. If you look at EFCC, for example, EFCC is different. The act that created the commission to investigate, monitor, money laundering and all economic and financial activity and prosecute. But INEC is created as an umpire to organize the contestation of election and all that, but it does not have punitive areas to prosecute. You need another institution to do that for INEC.
INEC agrees that it's part of their responsibility to prosecute, maybe not to investigate. The police investigates, gives them the case files, and then INEC is supposed, through their legal department, to prosecute the
INEC
cases.
don't prosecute. They rely on the security agencies to do so. How many persons have been convicted on electoral offense?
Security apparatus to investigate.
To investigate.
Okay.
Okay, part of the reform we are talking about is what the National Assembly is already considering, that we need to have a commission for electoral offenses. That is a good one, because INEC is not equipped enough to prosecute. I mean, INEC already is not even equipped enough to conduct elections, let alone prosecute electoral offenders. Right. So we need a commission to do that, and that commission, we must set it up now before the next general election, so that we will use that to curb or even the issues of electoral violence and all that. We will use to prosecute people accordingly, so that this will stand as a deterrent society.
You know, some observers during this past election in Kogi and Bayelsa, they termed it as a missed chance, you know, for Nigeria in getting elections right. Now we're counting down to other staggered elections. There's Edo State. Yeah. I mean, that is in the news, and we're seeing the build-up to that election. So if we could, as it were, look forward and say we have, okay, just about a year, or less than a year, actually, to Edo elections and other staggered elections in the country, what would you say are the things we need to put in place now, such that we won't have another missed chance or missed chances before the 2023 general election?
First, security. Security is one of the biggest problems in our election process. I don't know where they're going to get the security agents from, because the ones we have now, I mean, because, you see, if an adult is at home, the she-goat should not be left to suffer the pains of parturition on his theta. We can't just sit down and then follow the system the way it is. We must be able to, you know, recruit or retrain the security agencies.
I think that's a solution you put out there. Retrain.
Yes, retrain them and, you know, exfoliate them from these corruptive tendencies. If there's anything we need to do, is to make sure that we get people out of this banality of you just throw your professional responsibility to the wind just because you have to collect gratification to subvert the process. People should be patriotic. It is important, because if we go into Edo the way we just concluded Bayelsa and Kogi, I mean, our problem is just beginning.
Well, it's
we really, definitely don't hope so.
It's a cliffhanger, so to speak. These are issues that I believe that everyone who is a Nigerian should be as concerned about as you are. We have to thank you very much for being a part of our conversation this morning. Evans Ofeli is a legal practitioner. Thank you very much for your time.